reason why my dad was willing to get on board with this was because, as I have stated before, that autism didn't treat him so nicely either. Because, as I have stated before, that autism didn't treat him so nicely either, and he was mad at his parents because of how Catholicism treated him. And as I have stated before, he was, along with the rest of us, pretty devoutly into this. Meanwhile, my parents got married on May 29th, 1997. It was my dad's 18th birthday, and my mom was 25 for about 4 months by now. My parents still have a wedding photo up in their living room in our condo, and I must say that even though I am not on good terms with them at the moment, and I am not happy with my parents at the moment, I must say that my parents' wedding photo is something that whenever I look at it, it always brings a smile to my face. My parents just look so happy because they look happy, and what makes me happy as an autistic guy is when other people look happy. My dad was a hyperactive kid, and since his wedding day was the first day of his life as an adult, he was super hyper that day according to what he has told me. He was acting like a kid about to go to Disney World on his wedding day. He has a smile on his face in his wedding photo like he was so full of energy. My mom looked super happy in the wedding photo too. She looked so beautiful in that pink wedding dress with no veil, and she has a smile like she just won $1 billion. It could also be that the day she got married was about a week after she completed her residency as a physician, but she still looked so happy. Some other things I know about my parents' wedding is that since my mom's dad was dead, my mom's uncle was the one to walk her down the aisle. Since my dad's grandparents were devout Catholics, my dad's parents, after my parents made the vow and kissed each other, they walked out since they didn't like the fact that my dad was pretty much not Catholic anymore because he converted to Awareism for my mom. The wedding was held in my parents' condo, where they still live to this day in the nation of Robbins-Og, so they didn't have to put their cloaks on when they got married. My mother declared Robbins-Og independent from the United States when they bought the condo, which was about a week after they were engaged. If you leave the condo to enter the United States, you are in a city called Chicago, in an area called the Loop, which is located in the heart of the downtown of Chicago. We have to go to the Loop for school and work every day. Back when our condo was a part of the United States, it was a $750,000 two-bedroom condo that was 7 stories up in our building, and it was located inside the Loop, where most of the L trains travel in one direction next to the Red Line subway entrance to the Jackson station, on the interior of Harold Washington Library, State and Van Buren, and the Adams and Wabash stations in the Loop. That is a very expensive location, but with my dad making $3 million a year because of his work as recognized publicly, and my mom wanting to save other people's lives as a physician because she lost her dad so young, their salaries combined could afford that, along with sending me and my brothers to different charter schools specializing in specific areas of autism development and our main interests. Back to my mom and dad. After their wedding, they went to Niagara Falls in Canada for their honeymoon, and I still see pictures from there too. They also look so happy there. Since my parents were royals to Robbins-Og, they also needed to conceive a child quickly, and they could afford it with their salaries, even with them being that young, and that was when I, Marcus Philip Robbins, came into the picture. I was born on New Millennium Day of January 1st, 2000. My dad was 20, and my mom was 27, but going on 28 in 3 weeks. My mom was making a great deal of money from being the doctor, and my dad's amazing salary was still intact, and he already had a bachelor's degree because he went to school overtime and was already halfway to getting his master's degree, and in about 2 years after I was born, he got his PhD. Back to my birth, when I was born, just like my brothers were I was born in Wakanda, which is the country of Robbinsog. And after I left my mother, my Aunt Heather was my mom's midwife and washed me off. My mother was in a position where she was half weeping because of the pain from my natural birth, and sleeping because of how much energy she lost pushing me out. So while my mom was trying to regain the energy she lost, my dad was the first to carry me as a form of nurture after I was born. It was only about 9 at night, and my dad said my mom fell asleep until about 6 in the morning, and my dad literally did not move the entire time. All he did was hold me and cuddle me and cry and see tears hit my face as I was crying. When my mom woke up and looked at me, she just burst into tears, and she probably cuddled me harder and cried harder than my dad did. The next day, I had been alive for 2 days, and that was when the rest of my relatives came in to see me and hold me, including my mom's other 2 sisters and my dad's parents. Unfortunately, my dad's parents held me for about 5 minutes each because I don't think they were very happy because they knew I was not going to be raised Catholic. Another reason I don't think my dad's parents like me so much is because when I turned 2 and my dad finally completed his PhD in art, they moved to Orlando, Florida to retire, and they never came back up here in Robbins-Og to visit us. We always went for winter break to go to Orlando for a week to visit them, and I was always see of them over the year. I thought they never bothered to call my parents. They always just call in regards to that. They just Skype in about once a week and talk to me and my brothers. They never bother to ask how my parents are doing because apparently Catholicism means more to them than their only child and his wife, who has never treated them badly. They just don't like she isn't Catholic. And there was a time when my dad was a kid and she was an adult, and even though they abstained the whole way through, I also don't think they retired coincidentally around the time my dad got his doctorate because he was done with his school and they were done then. I just think it was a coincidence because my dad could pay for college fine. Meanwhile, back to myself. After I was about 3 months old, my parents tested me using the most innovative technology at the time to see if I had autism, and sure enough, I did have autism. My parents did whatever was in their power to treat me well as they could for my autism, before I went to kindergarten when I was 5 years old. By the time I went to kindergarten, here was a list of things that were established. 1. I was obsessed with the color red. 2. Instead of me listening to typical kids' music, I preferred listening to oldies rock and roll, especially the Beatles. 3. My favorite TV show was SpongeBob, and it was all I could talk about during my early days of school. 4. The worst things for my sensory issues at the time were loud noises and vegetables. 5. The best things for my sensory issues at the time were deep pressure and absolute silence and darkness when I was going to sleep. The last thing I brought up is very important to me because it's very important info to know, too, about me at the time. My parents were pretty shocked to find that when I was a young kid, I did not want to sleep with a nightlight. Most autistic kids are afraid of the dark, and I was not. However, when I was just a kid, they just said that deep pressure is very common among people with autism, and I got directly from my parents, and I was not afraid of the dark. Well, one thing I've always seen my parents do a lot to this day is cuddle up because of the deep pressure. Sometimes I see my dad in bed or on the couch with his arms wrapped around my mother, and sometimes I see my mom with her arms wrapped around my dad. Either way, when I see them cuddling, they look so happy with the smiles I see on their faces, and I love each of them so much with how tightly I have seen them wrap their arms around each other. However, back to me, yes, when I was younger, I loved cuddling up with my parents because their hugs would put me to sleep at night. I used to fall asleep in their room, and I would wake up the next morning in my room because my dad carried me over. When I first entered kindergarten, my parents said they wanted me to try and ease off a habit. I still cuddled with them, but then I went to my room to fall asleep. Meanwhile, when it comes to the school and me starting kindergarten, It was the first of many years of me going to the Kimball Charter School on Kimball Avenue where the Brown Line ends, which is a school specifically meant for students who had focus issues, which was the main issue I had with my autism, because at the time, I could be talking about one thing and then totally switch topics, and I had issues paying attention to other people, noticing social cues, so my parents sent me there, and I'm about to be a senior in high school, and I am doing much better there, and it paid off. However, one thing that my parents never tried to improve, along with my brothers, were the social skills that involve making friends, which is probably because my parents had no friends other than themselves, because they didn't want the other friends, because they were convinced, and tried to convince us that society was a terrible place because of how it treats people with autism. Every day I go into the United States for school. I wake up at 7 in the morning and to take a shower and have some breakfast and gather my supplies and go put the red cloak on. I grab my American passport and get on the elevator and head to the ground floor of my building and into downtown Chicago. And then leave and walk a block over to the Adams and Wabash station, and then board the one-way Brown Line train, which I always make because I am in downtown, and head away from downtown during the rush hour of Chicago, and ride it all the way to the Brown Line's terminus on Kimball Avenue with my hood up because it's not the red line. The convenient thing about the Kimball Termini station is that once I get out, I make a right, and it is only about 10-minute walk from there. I can see when I get out of the station. I usually arrive at about 8:45 at school, and classes begin at 9 and end at 4 in the afternoon, and I always get a study hall placed somewhere in my day. My brothers go to different charter schools around Chicago for different reasons. My younger brother Sam has behavioral issues, so he goes to some school on Polk Street off the Pink Line, and my other younger brother George goes to a school that's super friendly to kids with severe autism and sensory issues in Oak Park, which is off the Blue Line.